In this tutorial, I want to go into a little bit more detail on the merge and alignment process, specifically on aligning images. Now before I start this, let's look at the sample images that I'm going to align and merge. This is Independence Hall in Philadelphia. I was there on vacation with my camera, but I didn't have a tripod with me. I was standing here in front of the hall and the statue and thought this would make a great HDR shot. There are a couple problems with this scene. First of all, we have a lot of people here walking around while I'm trying to take the photo. They weren't aware that I'm trying to do an HDR exposure with multiple brackets, and they need to be standing still for that typically. The other issue I have, since I didn't have a tripod, there's camera movement between the frames. Let's just look at the different frames and see how much movement there is. So you can see that's pretty substantial. Now HDR Expose 3 will be able to automatically merge and align these images. And we're going to do it off of keyframe selections. But before I do that, I want to show you some of the details that you want to pay attention to when deciding which image to use as your keyframe. If you look at this overexposed image, you can see that this wouldn't make a good keyframe since many of the details of this image are blown out. Specifically here, the railing along the roof line. As you go with a darker keyframe, that detail comes back in. And with that detail, the software will have the elements that it needs to detect in order to do the proper alignment. So I can move down and darker, and you see that it renders the highlight information better. For that reason, this image wouldn't make a good keyframe selection, since so much of the detail that you need is overexposed. Let's go into HDR Expose 3 now and see how this works. I'm going to click on the Create and Merge New HDR Image. And I have my bracket down here. I'm going to select that. And you can see here all of my exposures are listed here. There are 5 different exposures that I have, each at 1-stop increments. I could also have shot more at half a stop increment if I wanted to, but in this case I did 5 exposures at 1-stop increments. By default, the software is going to select a keyframe for you. In this case, it's going to be the 0 EV frame. And you can see that it's a keyframe because this has the little key icon here. So let's just select this and then click on Merge and see what kind of results we get. And this is it. It doesn't look too bad. If we zoom in, we can see that the deghosting has worked quite nicely, and the people moving around the scene have been nicely isolated so that we don't see any ghost artifacts. If I move up here into the highlight range, I do see an alignment artifact or a ghost artifact up here on the ridge of the roof, and also here on the railing on top of the roof. But otherwise, the image looks good. I could probably go into Photoshop and clean that up if I wanted to. But what I want to do now is show you what this looks like when we select a different keyframe. So we go back to the Merge to HDR command. Select the same set of images. And now I'm going to go with the next darkest image as a keyframe. So let's select this. This is the -1 EV shot, and we'll do a merge again. So now just by changing the keyframe that we used, I'll go back in here in the same space, and we can see that that ghost artifact has been removed, both from the railing and the ridge of the roof here, just because we selected the darker keyframe. I'm going to try one more example, and I'm going to select a bright keyframe just to show you the effect that that will have. So we'll go back up and we'll go Merge to HDR. I'll select the same suite again, and now on purpose I'm going to select the +2 EV keyframe. Now as I zoom in here, you can see that there's a lot more ghosting or alignment artifacts happening in this image. even down here in the building and down below. And again, the reason for this is that the overexposed image has lost too much of its detail to be a good keyframe, especially when compared to the darker images. So if we look at the same space now on the image that we merged with the -1 EV keyframe, you can see that the people are sharp, there's no ghosting going on, and everything is properly aligned. And like I said, this is a very difficult image, due in part to all of the fine detail in the brickwork and in the railings and the windows and everything. So that's automatic alignment. Let's look at this image. This again was taken freehand without a tripod, and you can see that there's more movement in this. And again, there's a lot of detail in the stonework and everything of this church building. Again, we're going to look at the effect of the keyframe selection on this image, but I also want to show you some more advanced tools as well for alignment and even manual alignment. But one thing I also want to point out ahead of time is when you're gathering your exposure brackets, the overexposed images will also always have a longer shutter speed than the underexposed images. If you're capturing a handheld HDR exposure series, you just want to make sure that your overexposed image still has a shutter speed that's short enough for you to be able to hold the camera still and not have camera vibration blur the image. So let's look at the alignment options for this image. Go back into the software, and again, we'll do the Create HDR step. I'm going to select these images here, and I'm going to go into the Manual Align and Deghost options, and I'll click on the Preview button. This is going to load the automatic preview for this image. So the first thing I want to do when I come in here is look at the different keyframe options. If I select this one, this is the overexposed image, you can see that I'm starting to have some alignment artifacts happen here. I can try the other exposure series and look for one that produces the best results. Maybe I'll start with a -1 exposure. The other adjustment we have in our toolkit is called the keyframe tuning slider. Now by default, when you shoot raw images, it's going to come in at a value of 12. If you're shooting a static scene, like architectural work, with a tripod with no moving elements, you can click on the Merge Static Photos option, and that'll move the keyframe tuning slider down to a value of 0. Let me apply that to this image just so you can see what effect that has. This shows a lot of alignment issues. What we're doing here is telling the merge algorithms to place an emphasis on the smoothest tonal blending possible. So in this case, we're going to take all of our shadow information from the overexposed images and all of the highlight detail information from the most underexposed images. This will give us the smoothest possible tonal range. But what we give up for that is the automatic alignment functionality. In this case, this image was taken on the run without a tripod, and I need to prioritize the alignment in order for this to work out. So I'm going to adjust my keyframe tuning slider up. Let's take it up to a value of 18, click the Apply button, and see what that does. Now the image looks much better aligned. I like what I see in the preview here, so I'm going to commit that and do a merge and compare that. So let's zoom in on the detail and see what we have. All of the detail here in the roof and the siding, the scaffolding, and everything looks very nice. And that was just done by adjusting the keyframe tuning value. If I like the result, I'm done. I've used the automatic alignment functionality with a little bit of manual tweaking to the keyframe tuning amount. But I can go even further. I can do a full manual alignment. So let's look at how that process works. Go back into the merge step. Let's select the same images, and I'll go back into the manual process. Let's do something different now. I'm going to go for a softer keyframe tuning amount, just to try and have a smoother tonal transition in the image. Take this down to a value of 2, and I'll click the Apply button. Now, as you can see, we have alignment issues again. But I can go in now with my manual alignment tool, and I'll start to pick off individual details on the building in order to manually align them. So you want to look at something that's kind of sharp in the mid-tone range that you can find. So here's a nice little detail up at the top of this roof ridge. I'm just going to move all of the images and line them up. Now there are 4 preview windows here because I only had 4 images in my bracket. If I had 5 or 6 or 8 images in my exposure bracket, then I'd have just as many preview windows here for the manual alignment. Now you need at least 3 points to get a decent alignment, and the software supports up to 8 different alignment points. The more points you use, and the more spread out they are in the image, the better results you'll get from the manual alignment. So let's just go in here quickly, and I'll set some additional points. If for any reason you make a mistake and you want to remove a point, you can simply click on it and then hit the delete key to remove that point. Go back up and we'll pick another one. Just get the corner of the building here. And at any time in the process, I can hit the Apply button, and you can already see it's starting to come together nicely. So now I've set all 8 of my points, and I'll hit Apply. And now I'll click on the Merge button again. And here's our final result. You can see that the manual alignment has worked quite nicely in this case. Now this isn't something that you're going to want to do with every image. Go in and manually select 8 different points and do the manual merge process. But for those rare cases when the automatic alignment doesn't produce the results that you want, you have the ability to fall back on the manual alignment as another option. So let's zoom in and compare the details. This was our manually aligned image, and this is the one that we automatically aligned. And you can see in this case they're both very close. So it probably would have been easiest just to go with the automatic alignment for this shot. Now let's look at a different image. Now this is a very different scenario. This is a scene, interior architecture shot that was taken by a professional photographer named John Warner. Now here he had the best gear, the most sturdy tripod, and the best technique. So this image is completely static. There are no moving elements, nothing on the interior, nothing on the exterior, and the camera was perfectly positioned. Let's look at the different exposures here. This is our most overexposed image. And we're going to use that to get all of the shadow detail here from the back of the chairs. As we go down the exposure brackets, you can see how the exterior detail comes into play. This is our most underexposed image. We're going to use that to render the tonality in the lamp, the ceiling lights, and the exterior exposure. So again, I'll go to my Merge to HDR dialog. I'll scroll down. I'll select all of these images. Remember, when I click the Merge Static Images photo, I'm really setting the keyframe tuning value to 0. So it really doesn't matter which image I have selected as the keyframe, since we're not looking to align the images based on details in the image or remove ghosts from the image. So let's just click on the merge button and see what we get. Now, since John did such a great job with technique, stabilizing the camera using a cable release, sturdy tripod, we don't have any alignment issues in this image. So let's go in and look at the complete dynamic range that we were able to capture. I'm going to hit the reset preset here just to show you. This image has over 18 stops, almost 18 and a half stops of dynamic range. What we're looking at here is a linear 32-bit HDR image. All of the processing, all of the tone mapping in HDR Expose 3 is done on the full 32-bit image data. This light gray box is my display zone, and it shows you the range of this image that I'm able to represent on my computer display. And as we go up in exposure, you can see how this image comes together. So let's zoom in and look at the detail in the back of this chair. You can see that there's absolutely no noise in this dark shadow area. And that's due to this very large exposure bracket that John shot when he captured this scene. At the same time, if we look outside in the windows, you can see that all of the highlight information has been rendered. Let's go back in and select the same scene again. And now I'm going to turn off the Merge Static Photos option. That'll put it back at the default mode that we would have used if we had some objects moving in the scene. I'm going to leave the keyframe the same here at the 0.5 EV, and we'll do merge again. Again, this is the same scene, merged from the same images, only this time we turned off the Merge Static Photos option. So when I zoom in here, you can see that there's some noise that's been generated in the shadow detail. If I go back to the first rendering we did with the Merge Static Photos option, and I increase the brightness as well, you can see that that noise is gone. So if you're doing architectural work like this, and you have good technique with cable releases, steady tripod, and no moving objects in the scene, you're going to get the best results if you use the Merge Static Images option. If you're photographing outdoors and there's any wind in the scene or objects moving through the scene, you're going to get the best results with that unchecked using the default keyframe tuning values. So that's it for the automatic and manual alignment options. I hope you found this tutorial useful and understand how the different parameters and adjustments work. And you can try them out on your own images and find out which gives you the best results. Thanks again for watching.